Theodore. He's a tugboat and a friendly tugboat too. A friendly tugboat too. Oh, Theodore likes to do the things that friendly tugboats do. Pushing and a pulling in the great big harbor, in the great big world is so much fun. So many brand new things to discover. Waking with the sun, gotta get the job done. Oh, Theodore and Emily, Bodak, Hank and George, and the harbor master too.
Theodore, Hank, and Emily were on their way home to the Great Ocean Tug and Salvage Company dock after a long day. "Emily?" called the dispatcher. Yes, sir," said Emily slowly. "I have a surprise for you. I have decided that you are to have a new hat," announced the dispatcher. "A new hat?" repeated Emily slowly. "Yes," said the dispatcher. "You are too big now for that old hat." Well, the dispatcher thought Emily would be happy about getting a new hat. But Emily didn't say a word. "What did the dispatcher want?" asked Theodore. "I have to get a new hat," said Emily quietly. "A new hat?" Theodore shouted right away. "Oh, that's great!" "Oh, I wish I could get a new hat," added Hank. "But," said Emily, "I really like my old hat."
Well, that just came out of nowhere. How is Emily too big for her old hat? What, did she suddenly have a growth spurt we don't know about? And I also love how the dispatcher just right then and there decided for her. Didn't even give her a chance to make her own choice. Lovely. So the next day, Emily headed over to the repair dock to get her new hat. And this became a problem because now everyone thought it was a new tug and couldn't tell it was her. Seriously?
"Hey, who's that new tugboat?"
called Cumberland. "A new tugboat?" repeated Hank. "It's not a new tugboat," gasped Theodore. It's Emily." "Oh, we didn't know it was you. Because of your new hat," shouted Hank. "It's really fuzzy," said Theodore. "It's really fresh," added Hank. And fresh was the only word he could think of just then. "It's not the same," said Emily in a voice she could hardly hear.
I can't imagine how hard that is for Emily, knowing that none of her friends can tell that it's her under this new hat. It's this kind of plotline where I do get a bit confused. A person is still the same person as they are, even if something is a tad unusual about their appearance. This is kind of giving me To SquarePants or Not To SquarePants vibes, if you catch my drift. Just not as irritating. So all three tugs began to move the ship, but still no one could tell it was Emily. And that led to even more trouble.
Emily was so upset about her new hat that she wasn't watching where she was going. She steered straight towards Digby, the cable ship, who was busy laying cable along the shore. "Look out!" cried Petra. "Oops! Watch it!" called Digby. Emily roared her powerful engine and just managed to turn in time. But Digby, poor old Digby. "I think I'm jibberty-spiggity stuck," called Digby. "As usual." You see, Digby is always getting stuck somewhere. And Emily knew she'd caused an accident, and that was most unlike her. She was always so careful.
Well, first, sucks to be Digby right now. Poor guy just can't catch a damn break. Second, yikes to Emily for causing this accident had she not been so focused on her new hat. What I don't get is how her name is practically right there in plain view, and no one can tell? Is a hat really the only way these tugs and ships can tell who is who? They have names on their sides, let alone whistles for a reason. Hello? What is so hard?
"I cannot work in this hat," said Emily. "It's silly and dumb, and it feels different. Besides, no one knows who I am. I want my old hat back. Theodore, why did Emily have to get a new hat if she didn't want one? Asked Hank. The dispatcher said. The dispatcher, he repeated slowly to himself. And then, suddenly, he had an idea. An idea that might help Emily. Emily floated all the way to her favorite thinking place, under Owen, the oil rig, and turned off her engine. I'm never going anywhere in this silly hat. Somehow, without her old hat up there on her head, it felt like nothing would ever be right again.
I know this is a very serious scene, but I just had to make this joke. For Emily to make such a fuss over a hat is like...
What a superficial culture. Put on a hat and go to work, you shallow cunt.
But in all seriousness, I can understand where she's coming from. I mean, I'd be pissed off too if no one could figure out it was me. Then again, I'd be like, scrape that crud out of your eyes or go get yourself a pair of glasses. So Emily went to think under Owen and decided she wouldn't come out unless she had her old hat back. For the record, this is Theodore's spot. When the hell did it become yours?
Emily does seem different. It was Theodore, hurrying up to the dispatcher. Maybe it's her hat.
Her hat? Oh, yes. Emily does have a new hat today, but where is she?
I really like my lifeboat, continued Theodore.
Your lifeboat? That's nice, Theodore, but right now I'm trying to find Emily.
I've had it for a really long time. Almost forever.
Theodore, what are you talking about?
Did you ever have something you really liked?
Well,
said the dispatcher after a moment.
as a matter of fact, I still do. My flag. I've always had it flying, right up there over my head. It's kind of old, but, well, I like it.
Emily really liked her old hat.
I see. Do you think she misses her old hat? Maybe that's why she's acting so strangely?
Well, said Theodore.
And I thought she'd like a new hat,
continued the dispatcher. I guess everyone has favorite things, said Theodore.
And this is what the dispatcher should have realized before making this decision for Emily. There are some people who have special objects of theirs that do become some of their favorite things. And those things become objects that we just can't part with. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I too have a lot of my own favorite little things. And truthfully, I can't part with them for sentimental reasons.
But more of that later.
So Theodore found Emily and told her she should talk with the dispatcher. And she did so as she headed back towards the Great Ocean Dock.
Ah, Emily, there you are, said the dispatcher. I was just thinking.
I was thinking too, said Emily, before the dispatcher could finish, that I really want my old hat back. It had a worn-out spot on the back, and it flapped in the wind, and I really miss it. And besides, no one knows who I am in this new hat.
I would really like you to have your old hat back, too, said the dispatcher.
You would? Said Emily.
Yes, I would, repeated the dispatcher. After all, everyone has favorite things.
They do, said Emily slowly, and then she smiled a great big smile. Yes, they sure do.
Love how he just repeated exactly what Theodore told him. You didn't even have these thoughts earlier on, bro. But anyways, Emily went to go and get her old hat, and now everyone could tell it was her. Pfft. But they still needed to help Doc Cumberland and rescue Digby. You just left both ships floating around all day, and none of this was done earlier? Where were Fodek and George during all this? They could have helped Doc, and Theodore and Hank could have taken care of Digby. Like, really?
Well, what's everyone waiting for?
Well, even in the last light of twilight, Theodore and Hank knew who it was as soon as they saw that soft, floppy, familiar old hat.
Emily!
They shouted together.
Let's finish docking this ship, said Emily.
right, smiled Theodore. Let's go, added Hank.
Sounds good to me.
Called Cumberland. Emily felt like her old self again. That evening, as usual, the Tuggs pulled their hats down tight. And with her good old hat snuggled down just right, Emily drifted off to sleep, dreaming of all the wonderful things she'd do tomorrow.
And that concludes Emily's New Hat. Now, this story fits someone like Emily more. This one was another one of those stories that was kinda laid back, but had a nice little message to follow. There's really no problem with having favorite things. As I mentioned before, each one of us has that special item, or items, that we just can't part with for our own sentimental reasons. The same as Emily felt about her old hat. It's a very important message for children and adults to think about. For music, there were a few newer little themes heard. And for visuals, once again, a pretty good mixed variety. The Great Ocean Dock, the mouth of the harbor, the beach where Digby washed up, and underneath Owen. But yeah, overall, it's not really a fantastic episode, but it is pretty good, with a very nice little message. Up next is Emily and the Tug of War.